Today, we are joined by a former White House insider and a doctor and body language expert to discuss the first presidential debate that we all saw and was witnessed by over 65 million television viewers. First, let's get started with Reggie Love. We welcome him in. Reggie, we know that you worked with then Senator Barack Obama and later President Obama, and you are a New York Times best-selling author. Thank you for joining us, Reggie.
No, well, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate you bringing me on the show. This is great to be here.
And we're also going to bring in Dr. Jack Brown, who is not only a physician, but is also a body language and emotional intelligence expert. So we're going to bring him in to discuss the body language of not just the candidates, but President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and other presidents that he has studied over the years. But Reggie, let's get started with you. If you just want to give us a brief background on your work as a White House aide to President Obama and what you may have learned working alongside Joe Biden during those times.
I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work for not only Senator and candidate Barack Obama, but also while he was president. It was a great opportunity, and as many people know, he selected Joe Biden to be his running mate, and they were able to effectively convince the American people that the country needed to head in a different direction. And look, and I think for me, I definitely remember all the times and all the scenarios in which Barack Obama entrusted to Vice President Biden to lead very specific missions and tasks to bring, economic reform, healthcare, so many different policies that Joe Biden was a part of, and so many things that he helped to foster and to add real value to the American people. The Affordable Care Act is probably one of the most impactful pieces of legislation that has been passed since the New Deal, and it doesn't happen without someone like Vice President Biden working for it.
When you look at Vice President Biden as he was during this past debate, and then you look back when you were in that administration, what are the differences that you notice?
The culture is very different, right? When Barack Obama was elected president, you didn't have so many microphones out there. Like cable news and 24-hour news was sort of the biggest channel in which people got their information and communicated. And with the age of technology and social media and all the different elements that are now bleeding into the lives and into the mindsets of people, I think we're at a place in which it feels more polarized today than what it was 10 years ago, even though the issues still haven't really changed. The issues are still, can I get a job that's stable? Can I educate my kids? Can I afford health care if I get sick? Can I retire with dignity? Maybe can I take a vacation? And so I think those are still underlying the biggest issues that we're trying to solve for in this country. It's just communicated and talked about in a much different light and with much different levels of velocity now than what we saw a decade ago.
And Dr. Brown, I'll bring you in on this question because we do know that Obama voters that did not show up, in the same fashion in 2016 are the ones that are kind of missing now and on the fence. And then we also know that some turned Republican. What is it about him now, Dr. Brown, that you see in his body language that either A, mimics kind of that same confidence that President Obama had, or maybe that you see has diminished a little bit?
He's an empathetic individual, and that if you ask people about him in an absolute sense, without Donald Trump as a reference point, most people would say that's one of probably the biggest impressions I have of Joe Biden, is that he is a sincere individual and he has a lot of empathy. When you contrast the two, it's even more dramatic. Donald Trump has no empathy, he might say words, but he doesn't display any empathy. Joe Biden has a lot. So that contrast is something that probably sticks out in people's head dramatically. And that's dramatic. So that's the biggest difference between the two.
But in a debate situation, I think Joe Biden probably needs to be a little bit more forceful in trying to get his word out. What do you think about that, Reggie, and also to you, Dr. Brown, as you kind of have analyzed these debate situations?
I think people will agree that that debate the other night did not accurately show or talk about specific policies that help to inform the American people about what choices they were making. And I think some of that is Donald Trump style. I think some of that is part of how the debate was moderated. And look, I think campaigning as a whole is so much different today because of the coronavirus and what we saw in the primaries and what we saw in our last election cycle. So I think to your point about how do we educate the American electorate about the choices that they are going to have to vote on and make this upcoming November, I think, yes, something needs to happen. And I think, I don't think that another debate like the one we had this week is going to be super helpful in educating the electorate and in terms of what's really at stake and at risk right now.
Dr. Brown?
Some of your audience might know that Joe Biden has a history of stuttering in the past as a young boy, and he still has a little bit. And it seems like part of Donald Trump's tactics were deliberately to throw him off. In other words, if you use those same tactics on anyone, you would have someone who has maybe been successful at getting over their stuttering. All of a sudden it becomes a little more visible. So it seems like that was a tactic of Donald Trump's to do that and to interrupt. And I do agree what you alluded to earlier. If I was talking to Joe Biden or giving him advice, I might say maybe be a little more forceful, a little more louder, perhaps interrupt him and force him also to answer the question. He gets around not answering the question. That's not the question like when, will you denounce white supremacy? And then he gets around those questions. That's not, and he gives maybe a lateral answer to it. I'm sorry, Mr. President, that's not the question I asked you. Please answer the question I asked you.
You know, what needs to change for the American people to feel good about the Joe Biden that worked in that President Obama administration and the Joe Biden that is up for President of the United States?
I think there's really two main points. I think one, let's have our memory be long and accurate. Let's not be fooled about what the priorities are of this current administration. I think Trump did spent a lot of time saying, hey, Joe Biden, you've been in public office for 47 years, and what have you done to change any of these issues? But Joe Biden has never been the president of the United States. And when you think about the things that Donald Trump has done to have an impact on this country, it's, hundreds of thousands of lives to the coronavirus have been lost. He's tried to take away health care from millions of Americans. He's tried to, divide and fracture this country in a way like we've never seen before. And we can't let him off the hook for that. And then I think ultimately, people have to really believe in themselves and have to believe that their voice actually matters, and that what they do in November not only will impact them in the near term, but it will have a huge impact on the kind of country that we leave for our children and our children's children.
We all saw that there were tendencies and behaviors from Donald Trump that were quite disturbing. And then, Joe Biden had to kind of respond or not. Let's just get into the body language and the emotional intelligence of Donald Trump and why he would behave in that manner on a global stage for the first presidential debate.
If there was one difference, is perhaps Joe Biden appeared to stutter a little more. And I think that Donald Trump's tactics were to push him in that direction. How do you make a stutterer stutter more if they've been successful at overcoming that mostly? How do you make it come out? So I think that was one of his tactics to do that. And that, you know, from a nonverbal point of view and from a verbal point of view. So he's quite aggressive in that.
What's the tactic behind, and this is from your professional opinion, again, you are a physician as well as an expert with this emotional intelligence and body language. What is the motive behind interrupting someone, and I just want to make sure I have this right, over 120 times, and at one point,
that's quite a bit.
And at one point, over 10 times for just one question. We do know that debate prep was for Trump to do what Trump does, which is essentially bully and overtalk. But the over 120 times of interrupting throughout the 90 minutes is a bit excessive.
He's in the habit of interrupting a lot. So it's just part of his baseline behavior. I would argue that most of that was deliberate interruption. We interrupted a lot in normal conversation. And if I was in a debate, even if you're trying to be you know, stick to the rules, you're going to interrupt a little bit. But he did it excessively. So he was trying to bully and look, in his mind, stronger. So how do I look stronger? Well, I'm going to talk louder. I'm going to call you Joe instead of Mr. Vice President or Mr. Biden. I'm going to call you Joe because you're just Joe. I'm the president. So there was that as well. So he's talk louder, faster, and interrupt. And it begins to feel, you know, there might be people in the audience that have been bullied. And you don't have to be physically bullied. You can be emotionally bullied. And if someone's constantly interrupting you, or it can happen at work, it can happen in the home. If you're constantly interrupted and shouted over, you're not valuing that person's opinion, and you're diminishing them as a human being. So it's a more subtle form of it. You almost feel physically bullied when that happens to you a lot. And, you know, so the audience is a surrogate to that. And so in his mind, he looks like a stronger leader in his mind. That doesn't make him a stronger leader, but in his ego, it makes him feel like that. And for his base, the people that already believe in him, yeah, that will reinforce their belief. For the people that don't like Donald Trump, that will push them away, of course, not hard to figure out. For the people on the fence, most of them will be offended by that, because they'll put themselves in Joe Biden's shoes. So that will backfire on him with respect to a debate. That technique will backfire on him.
Right, because I think people came out feeling empathetic for the vice president. And just by contrast, Vice President Biden interrupted 66 times. If we can just quickly go to 2016, when you analyzed Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in that debate. And in that one, many people may recall how he kind of used his presence, right? Because he's a big man, kind of used his presence across the stage with her, and how he turned his body. In the debate against Joe Biden, he also did some of that body turning and head kind of nodding thing he did. Can you just give us a synopsis of what that meant when he did it to Hillary Clinton, a woman, in 2016, and what you noticed about him using that body towards Vice President Biden?
Well, a big contrast between 2016, and I think it was the second debate primarily, where in 2016 versus the other night, was, of course, we didn't have COVID. So there was no handshaking. And this was not, and I think the second debate, the one I'm thinking of, and the one people will remember, was a open forum where they walked around. Well, Donald Trump came up behind Hillary Clinton several times and into her personal space. And this was predatory behavior. And it makes people feel profoundly uncomfortable and can throw them off their game. Most practiced speakers, male or female, if you're on TV a lot, that would unnerve the heck out of you. I don't know that that if I was in Hillary Clinton's shoes, that I would have been very good at that. I would have turned my torso around and faced him. Or at least maybe my shoulder, so he wasn't directly at my back. In 2000, Al Gore did that to a little bit to George Bush 43. He came up close to him in his personal space, but he was 90 degrees to George Bush. He didn't come up behind him. The other night, of course, they both pretty much stayed at their lecterns. But yes, was Donald Trump using aggressive body language when he was at his lectern? Yes, he does. He does have he turns his torso a lot strongly, and people will notice that when he looks at the teleprompters, that he twists his torso, and that's almost like a tick-like behavior. He's leaning on the lectern, and he's using it for support, and then he is overweight. And you said he was a big man. His weight is larger than is published, but his height isn't. At the most, he's probably 6'1.5".
Well, you're the doctor. You can say that. I can't say that.
Yeah, he's not 6'3". But when he twists, if you're 74 and you're overweight and you have a bad back, you're going to lean on that lectern. John Kennedy did it in all during his presidency when he was running for president. He had a World War II back injury, so he leaned on it. Bill Clinton took over that. He emulated that style because John Kennedy had a way of making it look alpha and making it look in charge. And as long as you don't look like you're leaning on it for weight and you're almost in a more alpha manner with your hands kind of towards the front of the lectern as opposed to the back.
Do the American people have anything to worry about from a medical standpoint with both of these candidates? And I ask this to you as a physician and someone that has studied both of these candidates for years.
Well, I mean, they'll both be the two oldest presidents. If first term for Joe Biden, he'll be the oldest first term. Prior to that, the oldest first term is Donald Trump, first term president. So so that's always a concern. The older you get. Joe Biden did have 2 aneurysms in his brain in 1988 that probably weren't age related, a little somewhat, just because but you can have aneurysms in young people that doesn't appear to have left any long-term complications. Donald Trump probably has had a few small strokes. When people, I can't say this definitively, but if you watch him with regards to strokes, but I would put money on it. If you look and see the way he walks, his right leg swings out to the side, along with his right-sided diminished grip strength, and the famous pictures of him not being able to hold a bottle of water or using the other hand for assistance or sliding his pinky underneath the glass for support. He has got diminished grip strength on the right, and he's swinging his leg out to the right. Both of those things could be caused by something that's not related to a stroke, but together, along with other symptoms he's had, and the fact that he's a 74-year-old with risk factors, that this was probably a stroke. And he probably had multiple small ones, and that's an important thing to look at. And people have speculated at dementia. It's difficult to say if he's got dementia, but he could very well. If you have multiple small vascular strokes, they can really be almost impossible to differentiate from Alzheimer's disease in a clinical setting. They're very, very similar. And the final common pathway, they can essentially have very similar symptomatology in manifestations and complications.